Hello, everyone. Once again, this is Bible Perspective. I am Brother Ryan Bolin. Thank you all for joining me. This is a channel where we analyze current events from a biblical and prophetic point of view. What I want to talk about in this video is something that just goes to show time and time again that we are engaged in a real spiritual battle. This is a spiritual battle that we engaged in on all fronts. And Christians have to always keep that in mind. And what I'm talking about is that a professor in Texas was fired, a biology professor in Texas, rather, was fired simply for teaching simple biology, simply for teaching that certain chromosomes produce males, certain chromosomes produce females, and he was fired. Now, this happened in America. This is not a space program. This is not science fiction. This is what is going on in our country. So I'm going to get right into this article, read a portion of this article. We're going to get right into our discussion of what I believe is going on here and what I believe is going to amp up as we get closer and closer to the end of times and as we get closer and closer to the coming of Jesus Christ. So let's get right into this. And the article says a Texas biology professor was fired for what attorneys say were, quote, standard principles about human biology and reproduction, has filed a complaint against his former employee. Dr. Johnson Varkey, a former adjunct professor of St. Philip's College in San Antonio, filed a charge of discrimination with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission after he was fired in January. Man, this went back a long time ago. In response to what the community college said were, quote, numerous complaints about a lesson he taught last fall on human biology, according to Plano-based First Liberty Institute. Numerous complaints. Now, who's doing the complaining here? That's what's interesting to me. Who's doing the complaining? Is it staff members? Is it students? Is it a mixture of both? Let's go on. The complaint, which accused Varkey of, quote, religious preaching. Religious preaching. I'm laughing because this man probably wasn't preaching anything religious, but he was probably just preaching natural biology, which the Bible, basically supports. But let's go on. Religious preaching, discriminatory comments about homosexuals and transgender individuals, anti-abortion rhetoric, and misogynistic banter. Oh, that sounds so political. Ugh, this stuff makes me want to just barf. Centered on a student walkout in November 2022 after Varkey stated that biological sex was determined by chromosomes X and Y according to attorneys. Well, it is. Article goes on to say, in response to the lesson, a, quote, handful of students walked out. So it has in quotation marks, these were a handful of students. So who were these students, right? What worldview did they have? They walked out of his class and complained that Varkey's teaching, quote, pushed beyond the bounds of academic freedom with his personal opinions that were offensive to, this thing cuts off here. They are offensive to these students who, while the students who walked out of Varkey's class were not identified, LGBT advocates insist sex and gender are often fluid rather than binary. Christian apologists argue that if sex and gender were not intertwined, cross-sex hormones or sex change operations will be unnecessary. And that's all I want to read right there. You guys can read the rest of that article in the description box below, but you already know where that's going. I talk about this on my political channel a lot. You've probably heard this said countless times about this whole debacle about transgenderism and so forth. Here's the bottom line. We could argue all day about it. If a person, and I'm going to speak on a purely natural level here, then I'm going to get into the spiritual part, because behind the physical is the spiritual that influences the physical. If a person says, whether they're biological female or biological male, says that I identify as someone of a different sex, okay. If you yourself say you identify from someone of a different sex, okay. That's your choice. You chose to do that. It's not my choice. It's not the government's choice. It's not the president's choice. It's not the professor's choice. It's your choice. You chose to identify with someone of the opposite sex. If you're a male, biological male, but you identify as a female for whatever reason, maybe you felt like you was born that way and you had these desires or whatever, look, and you identify for that, okay, that's your choice. All right. But a professor in a class is charged with teaching on that particular subject. He or she has to teach that if this is a biology class, we have to teach biology. This is what biology, this has been proven, okay? Whether or not the person feels like if it's a biological male and he feels like he wants to be a female, okay, that's his choice. I'll call you a female outside into the secular world. I'll call you a female. That's what you want. I'll call you that. Just so I don't have to hear the person hooping and hollering and cussing and getting mad, because that's a spirit. But I'm gonna get into it a little while later. Okay, but I'll call you that. Okay, but in a biology class where a teacher is supposed to be teaching biology, he or she should be teaching biology. Any preferences students may have about whatever, that's on them. But you still need to understand biology. You understand what I'm saying? If you feel like you want to be a male or female and whatever, that's your choice. But the teacher is supposed to be teaching about what needs to be taught in that class. If it's a math class, they should be teaching math, not teaching on accepting these kind of worldviews. Your purpose is to teach math. Your purpose is to teach biology. Your purpose is to teach history. Your purpose is to teach science. That's what you're supposed to do. Any other choices outside of that, that's on the students, okay? That's on the students. That's totally up to them. But what has happened, because we have told God, our country en masse have told God and have told the Holy Spirit and they're told right and wrong, get out the door. You know, we don't need you. We have allowed secular humanism to come into our school systems. We have allowed Marxism and communism and socialism to take over our school systems, to take over our governments. But particularly here, we're talking about the school systems. We have allowed these anti-God worldviews and ideologies to come in. So what do we expect? What do we expect? This is just prepping everyone up for the new world order. This is preparing everyone for the Antichrist, so that when he comes on the scene, people's minds will be so fractured from understanding basic factual realities that when the Antichrist, the man of sin, the lawless one, begins to preach and teach his rhetoric, it will be easier for them to accept. You understand? You know, it's just like Paul said in the book of 2 Thessalonians in chapter 2. He stated that God would give these people over to a strong delusion. Why? Because they have chose out of their own free will to reject the love of the truth that was given to them. Because humanity, and I'm speaking here, and I'm speaking to America in particular. This is all over the world because the Antichrist is going to rule the world. But I'm speaking of America in particular, okay, because so far America is supposed to be the land of the free and still supposed to be a place where people can be free to be whatever they want to be and pursue what they want to pursue. I'm speaking of America in particular. When you get rid of all of the principles that this country was founded on, and you reject all of these things, it's going to be easier for the Antichrist to come in and deceive the masses of people. And we told God in mass, we don't want you in the schools. We don't want you in the schools. We don't want teaching in the Bible in the schools. We don't want teaching right and wrong in the schools. You know, we don't want any of that. It's going to be easier for the Antichrist to come in and teach and preach his rhetoric. Because people in this country have rejected the truth out of their own free will. When the Antichrist comes on the scene, it's going to be easier for them to be deceived. We are in dangerous times, but there's still hope for this country. And part of the reason why there's still hope for this country is not just praying for the country. Yes, we should pray. We're supposed to always pray. That's what Christians always fall to. They fall to the default. We need to pray. We need to pray. Yeah, we need to pray. Every true born again Christian knows that we are supposed to pray. We all should know that by now. But we have to do more than prayer. Faith without works is dead. We got to do more than pray. We have to speak out. We have to expose this evil. And then, and you know, I talk about politics because in every physical realm, there is a spiritual component to it. Whether it's politics, whether it's movies, whether it's music, there is a spiritual component to it. And on the political realm, as Christians, if we decide to be involved in the political process, if we decide to be involved in the political process, we have to make sure that we are looking at the policies and worldviews of the individuals that we are voting for. We just can't vote based on party lines. What I mean by that is, well, I'm a Republican. I'm just going to vote Republican because I've been voting Republican all my life, and I'm going to vote Republican. I'm Republican. Or I'm a Democrat. I've been voting for Democrats all my life, and I'm going to keep doing it. I was born a Republican, I'll die Republican. I was born a Democrat, I'll die Democrat. No, you weren't. You were born a sinful human being. You became associated with a particular political ideology over the course of time. You was born a human being made in the image of God who inherited the sin nature from Adam. That's what you was born. That's the biblical factual data. Okay? Our political affiliations we chose over the course of time. But even in that, we still have to look at the worldviews and policies of the people that we vote for. Why? Because they're the ones that put the worldviews and policies in place. They're the ones that push, promote, and encourage legislation or laws that make this type of stuff possible. That's why. Look throughout the Old Testament, you see the same processes. When the kings obeyed God, things flowed. When the kings disobeyed God, things did not flow. Am I right or wrong? The word tells us that. So the same principle here. We are where we at right now because we told, as a country, because we told God we don't want you anymore. But let me sum the video up in this. When we reject the ways of God, when we reject his word, when we reject right or wrong, that affects the mind. That affects the brain. What we have to understand is that we were created by God. What these people have to understand, we're created by God. God created us with a brain. He created us with the ability to reason and make decisions, which makes us totally different from animals. Okay? We make conscious decisions. We reason and we use logic and understanding to come to proper decisions. When you get rid of the concepts of right or wrong, and you get rid of the word of God out of these different institutions, you open it opens yourself up to worldviews that corrupt the mind. A person's mind can become so corrupt because they have rejected these ways that God have implemented. Their mind can become so corrupt that they don't not only know the difference between right or wrong, but they can't even reason properly. There are people right now that honestly believe that a man can have a baby. They honestly, truly believe that men can get pregnant. They believe that. They believe that. They literally believe that. They sincerely believe in their heart that a man could get pregnant, even though there hasn't been any factual, visible evidence to even remotely validate that. You see signs and pictures of billboards with pregnant men. That means nothing. A billboard with a pregnant man does not in any way prove that men can get pregnant. But you see what the enemy is doing. He's pushing his demonic agenda. The purpose is to confuse the masses, get their minds and brains so diluted, so corrupt, that when his son steps on the scene, the man of sin steps on the scene, it will be so easy to get people's minds. It will be so easy to get them to accept the mark. It will be so easy to get them to worship him. But you got to get the mind first. You got to get the brain first. And what we got to understand is that when we don't use logic and reason, we are actually making God look bad. Because God created logic and reason. Why? Because God is the ultimate mind. He's the ultimate universal mind. Not Lucifer. God is the ultimate universal mind. He's the ultimate logical being. When he created the universe is created based off of reason. There are reasons why the earth and the sun are far apart like they are. There are reasons for that. God didn't do that just because he don't have nothing else better to do. He did it for a reason. If the sun was any closer, y'all have heard of this, but if the sun was any closer, what would happen? We would burn. If the sun was any further apart, what would happen? We would freeze. It's based on reason. He's the ultimate mind, the ultimate universal mind, the ultimate logic. When you reject him, it affects the brain, it affects the mind. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many people embracing these worldviews to the point where a man in a college will get fired because he's teaching logic and reason. It's a shame, but I pray that eventually America will open their eyes before it's too late. And that's what I had to say about that. What do you guys think? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel. God bless you all, and see you again.